What's up YouTube, Capital G here, giving you guys a breakdown and explaining the brand new huge ruling changes for Master Rule 5 and the new rulings revisions that are going to go into place starting April 1st, 2020 in the OCG. I bet you guys did not expect Master Rule 5 to get an update before it even officially started, but the joke's on all of us because that's exactly what Konami is going to be doing. As I just said, this is scheduled only for the OCG as of now, but just like Master Rule 5 eventually was announced in the TCG, I personally believe that all of this is going to come to the TCG sooner or later, probably within the next couple of weeks or so. But obviously with the COVID-19, Konami is more focused on that and what events have to be canceled, etc., in the TCG. So we'll probably get an update on the official Yu-Gi-Oh website or a video with Jerome McHale, something to that effect. But if you think that this is not going to come to the TCG, you're just being delusional, because whenever we get major rule changes, they do affect both games for the most part. Anyways, let's go ahead and check out these new ruling changes because they are actually pretty massive, some of them, and they are going to affect a ton of cards that we currently play. There are 5 of them, guys, and I do apologize in advance. It is going to probably take me a little while because some of these rulings are actually kind of complicated. A lot of people don't understand them. I'm going to try to put them in layman's terms as well as read them verbatim. So let's go ahead and check out the first one. So the first one is regarding the activation of monster effects for monsters returned to the main deck or the extra deck face down. Unless it is specifically referenced in the text, monsters that are returned to the main deck or the extra deck face down cannot activate their effects. This includes mandatory effects. So the example that they give is if your opponent has something like an absolute 0 on the field and you evac the absolute 0, you use Compulse on it, it will currently right now blow up your field. It'll kill all the monsters on your field. They'll get a free Regeki. However, under the new way of resolving this, if Absolute 0 is returned to the extra deck by Compulse evac device, its effect to destroy all monsters your opponent controls will not activate. This basically means that Konami is kind of redefining how spinning to the deck works, whether it be the main deck or the extra deck. If you spin something to the deck, even if it has like a mandatory effect when it leaves the field, it's no longer going to work. Now, some of the examples that I can give you guys really quickly is something like Shooting Quasar Dragon. Shooting Quasar Dragon says when this card leaves the field, you can special summon 1 Shooting Star Dragon from your extra deck. Now, if your opponent just runs over your Quasar Dragon, you can still activate that effect. However, if it returns to a deck, i.e. an extra deck, if your opponent uses something like Evac Device or Altergeist Sequidius and it gets bounced to the extra deck, you cannot get the Shooting Star Dragon anymore. This is honestly going to affect a ton of extra deck cards. This is going to affect, for instance, like the entire Crawler archetype, which is basically going to be unplayable now. All of their monsters, their extra deck monsters, have clauses where if they're sent, if they leave the field by an opponent's effect, they get to summon Crawler monsters. That's just not going to work anymore if you bounce them to the extra deck. Even the main deck Crawler monsters, where they say, let me see if I can find it. Let's see. If this face-up card in its owner's possession leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you can special summon 2 Crawler monsters. Now, again, if you Regeki these things, they'll activate. But if they are sent to a deck, i.e. if you use something that spins them back to the main deck, these monsters will not activate anymore. So this is a major nerf to certain archetypes like Crawlers, and it's a major nerf to extra deck monsters that activate when they leave the field. Things like Absolute 0, things like Shooting Quasar Dragon. This is definitely going to affect some cards. Anyways, the next one, regarding the activation of card effects that move away from their activation location before their effects activates. It says in card text, cards refer to their activation or their effect activation requirements as well as their effect activation location. For example, and if an effect activates when a monster itself is normal summon, for instance, or it says it activates on the field. For instance, if you normal summon Stratos and search a card, that means that Stratos is activating on the field. It says if it is a trap card whose effect activates when it is sent to the graveyard, it activates in the graveyard. That would be something like Waking the Dragons. or one of the like True Draco traps, I think is like a better example. For instance, you tribute a True Draco card, it goes to the graveyard, you get to pop a monster on your opponent's side of the field. It says if a card moves location from its activation location to a different location before its effect is activated, its effect cannot be activated. This includes mandatory effects. So the perfect example, or the example that they give, is related to Crush Card, DD Crow, and Sangan. So in the example currently, and I don't think I'm going to read this verbatim just to kind of save you guys a little bit of time, but let's just say that you have a Crush Card virus and you tribute a Sangan. So you tribute Sangan as a cost and Sangan hits the graveyard immediately. Right now in the OCG, if you were to DD Crow as Chain Link 2 and banish the Sangan, your opponent would still be able to search. However, under the new way, your opponent is not going to be able to search. And the reason is because when Sangan is tributed, guys, obviously, the second that the Crush Card is activated, Sangan's already in the graveyard. But just because Sangan's in the graveyard doesn't mean it has activated its effect yet. You activating the Crush Card still have to give your opponents, let's just say me for example, you still have to give me an opportunity to respond. This means that I could use 7 Tools of the Bandit or Solemn to stop your Crush Card. But if I respond with something that moves that Sangan, which has not activated its effect yet, that means Sangan will not be able to activate its effect. And generally speaking, I know that I don't know all the examples because this is new, but I think that this will mainly affect cards that have cost. In fact, the Crush Card example is relating to a cost. Let's just say that you had an Altergeist Miluseek and you attacked me and I used something like D-Prison and you wanted to use a Link Karibo in your graveyard to make sure that your Miluseek hit the graveyard. Link Karibo tributing the monster on field is a cost. Same thing goes with Altergeist Protocol. Giving up the Altergeist card to activate it is a cost. So if you gave up your Miluseek for either one of these cards, if I use something like a DD Crow and I move Miluseek before she has a chance to activate, she won't be able to activate because she's no longer in the graveyard. I could even use something like the Transmigration Prophecy and put her ass back in the deck, and now she's not where she needs to be. She needs to be in the graveyard for her to activate. But since you sent her to the graveyard as a cost, I can respond and move her before she gets a chance to activate. So honestly, cards like DD Crow, Transmigration Prophecy, cards that can move things from the graveyard are going to be significantly better when it comes to cost. If you mill something, if you mill for Dante, we know Dante mills for cost. If you mill a Seer, your Seer is in the graveyard as a cost. You cannot activate that Seer immediately. You have to give me a chance to respond. If I move your Seer with one of these cards, your Seer will not activate. So basically that's how that's going to work. And there was a lot of misinformation with YG Organization because they originally mistranslated it wrong. People thought that MST was going to negate cards, but this doesn't have anything to do with resolution, guys. It's all about activations. Next up is another big one. This is regarding the normal or special summoning of a monster in relations to card effects that mention during the turn you activate this card / effect. It says some cards will have text such as during the turn you activate this effect, you cannot special summon monsters except blank monsters. Or during the turn you activate this card, you cannot summon monsters except with this card's effect, which have activation requirements for whether or not you summon certain monsters during this turn. Cards with this effect will now check whether or not the summoning of a monster described in the text was successful for their activation requirements. So this kind of sounds confusing, but don't worry, I'll put this in layman's terms. So the example that Konami uses is with a card called Rage with Eyes of Blue. Let me pull that up right quick for those of you guys who don't know that card. This card says you cannot normal or special summon monsters the turn you activate this card except Blue Eyes White Dragon. Now, the example that they have is currently right now as it stands, if you cannot activate a Rage with Eyes of Blue during the turn that you normal summoned a Maiden with Eyes of Blue and she was negated by a Solemn Judgment. Now, obviously, Maiden with Eyes of Blue is not a Blue Eyes White Dragon, so even if I solemned a card that you summoned that is not Blue Eyes White Dragon, you still can't activate that Rage with Eyes of Blue. However, the way that they're going to change it is Rage with Eyes of Blue actually is going to check the game state and see when you tried the normal summon or special summon, whatever, was that summon actually successful? Because if the summon was not actually successful, then you're allowed to activate this card. Now, the thing about it is, this is pretty significant to me because it kind of allows you to cheat in theory. I mean, some of the cards that I immediately thought of, guys, were things like Pot of Duality, Card of Demise, and Red Eyes Fusion. So you guys know none of these cards allow you to just, well, I'm pretty sure, let's see, yeah, none of these cards allow you to special summon during the turn that you activate these cards. This means that, let's just say I wanted to summon a Cyber Dragon, right? And you activated Solemn Warning. Even if I attempted to special summon, I can still now activate things like Pot of Duality immediately after, or a card like Red Eyes Fusion, Card of Demise, because these cards are going to check the game state and basically see that, yeah, I did try to special summon, but my summon was not actually successful. So it's basically like the summon didn't happen. To me, these cards that kind of like, you know, they can only work if you don't normal or don't special or something like that, these cards are all going to get a major boost, because if you actually negate those actions, those summons or those cards, your opponent can just activate those cards later in the turn. So this is going to be a major one in my opinion. Why do I keep going back to my desktop? Okay, so the fourth one says, and this is regarding the special summoning of monsters that mention they can only be special summoned once per turn. Certain cards have the text, you can only special summon blank once per turn, which means that they can only special summon cards or a card with that name one time during the entire turn. Cards with this text will now only count towards the summoning if the summoning of a monster with that name was successful during the turn. So it just basically talks about Speedroid or High Speedroid Chambara. For instance, if you were to special summon or synchro summon a High Speedroid Chambara and your opponent used Solemn Judgment or Solemn Warning, something to negate that, you would be able to summon another copy. An example that I pulled up would be something like the Sky Striker Ace Kagari. She specifically says, let's see if I can find her, you can only special summon Sky Striker Ace Kagari once per turn. This means that if I use Ray, or if I just normal Ray and then I link summon into her and you Solemn Warning her or you negate her summon somehow, I can just go into another copy during that same turn because the summon was not actually successful. Now, don't quote me on this because I could be wrong, guys. I think that means that Mech Knight monsters can be special summoned more than once if you negate their summons, because it's kind of interesting. The way Konami, or the way I'm reading this, it kind of seems like it works with monster effects, but I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure if it's just inherent summons or if it's monster effects. I think Mech Knights are effects, but I'm not exactly sure. I believe that it would work with Mech Knight monsters as well. For instance, if you summon like a Blue Sky or something and your opponent Solemn, then I think you can summon like another copy of a Blue Sky. Now, the last one is actually relating to trap monsters and them basically not taking up your back row anymore. It says, regarding continuous traps that special summon themselves to a monster zone by their own effects, continuous trap cards such as Embodiment of Adopolis, which special summon, or which has the effect, special summon this card as a normal monster, blah, 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 its stats don't matter. This card is still treated as a trap. Let's see, that can special summon themselves to a monster zone, will now free up spell and trap zones that were placed in, or that they were placed in before. So basically, you guys know these kind of trap monsters, the ones that specifically say that they count as trap monsters. I guess like some of the new Eldritch cards, or things like Metal Reflect Slime, which I don't know, maybe this is relevant because, you know, Merrick's getting some cards, but things like the new Eldritch cards or Metal Reflect Slime, these monsters are going to special summon themselves, but they're no longer going to occupy your back row. So in essence, this is just a buff to trap monsters. They're just going to be a little better. Now, the real interesting thing, and this is going to be kind of weird, is a card like Mystical Space Typhoon can still actually destroy these trap monsters even if they're not occupying a spell and trap zone. If you look at Mystical Space Typhoon, all it says is target a spell or trap on the field, destroy that target. These cards still count as trap cards. Konami didn't say anything about them not being trap monsters anymore. They just say that the back row is not going to be occupied. So even though these cards are just in the main monster zones, they can still technically be destroyed by cards like Twin Twisters or MST, because these cards don't specify that they only destroy cards that are in the back row. They just say destroy spells or traps. So it's going to be kind of a crazy little ruling, but yeah, MST will still be able to destroy these same exact type cards. They're just going to be a little better in the future. But you guys let me know what you feel or how you feel about all of these rulings. I know this is a lot to take in. I really didn't expect Konami to kind of update Master Rule 5 before it came out, but it's definitely going to be a major adjustment. Anyways, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comment section below, or I really implore you guys to check out the Reddit thread on this, because there are a lot of people explaining some of the basics and probably doing maybe a little better job than I can. But thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos